What's up, everybody? Welcome to Rex Engine. Hope everyone's having a fantastic day. I'm pretty excited today because today marks the release of the brand new enemy AI update, which I gotta say, I feel like I've been working on this thing forever, and I'm so excited to share it with all of you guys. So this new system lets you create really complicated enemies and bosses and give them crazy patterns and behaviors. You can do stuff like make multi-phase boss fights, or all the way down to very simple stuff like enemies patrolling back and forth and turning when they hit a wall. You can have enemies that react to the player or to where the player is or what the player is doing. You can have them do things like change behaviors when they get below a certain hit point threshold. There's so much to explore here, and I'm really psyched to finally get to show it to everyone. So let's dive right in. This is going to be an introductory video to the AI system, and it's going to show you how to do some really simple stuff and just give you the kind of foundational building blocks of the system. And there are going to be many more videos to come afterwards that show you how to do crazier and crazier stuff. So to kick this off, I've got this very basic enemy right here. At the moment, he has no AI. And let's click on him and let's go to Tools, Rex Engine, and there's a new command here, Add AI. I'm so glad to finally have that on there. We can see this is going to give us a new AI object on the enemy. And if we open that, the first thing we see underneath it is an AI routine. Now, enemies can have as many AI routines as they want. And an AI routine is essentially a bundle of different behaviors that all interact together to make the enemy do something. So for this one, when we click on it, we can see it's got 3 different segments in its inspector. There's movements, sequences, and events. And these 3 things are the 3 major building blocks of this AI system. So a movement is going to be how the enemy moves. It could be patrolling left and right, maybe turning when it hits a ledge or a wall, jumping over ledges when it finds them, or pits rather. It could be following a target like the player or any other target you want. It could be moving between multiple different positions that you set. Or it could just be standing around with its hands in its pockets doing nothing. Sequences are going to be sequences of actions. So an action can be basically anything. It could perform an attack, it could jump, it could damage itself, it could raise or lower the music volume or play a different music track, it could change its movement routine, it could play an animation. There's a huge list of actions these guys can do, and we'll get more into that shortly. But basically, a sequence is going to be a list of actions that play one after the other. And finally, there are events. Events are things that are reactive. So they let the enemy react to certain things in its environment or certain things the player is doing. An event could be that the enemy took damage and you want to respond to that in some way. Or it could be that a timer counted down, and at the bottom of the timer, you want the enemy to react to that in a certain way. Or it could be a physics event. So maybe the enemy walked into a wall and you want something to happen when that happens. So events are reactive. They're in the format of something happened, now how does the enemy respond? So let's start off at the top of the list with movements. Let's give this guy a really simple patrol movement. So he's going to walk back and forth, and when he hits either side of this ledge, he'll turn around. So under movements, there's a starting movement slot. And whatever is in the starting movement is going to be the movement that plays when this enemy first starts doing anything. So right now there's nothing, but I'm going to click on Add Movement, and a little menu pops up. We can do Follow Target, Patrol, Waypoints, or Wait. So I've described all of those just a minute ago. So for the time being, let's do Patrol. And we can see this pops up a brand new movements section underneath the AI routine, and it's got a patrol movement there now. So if we click on that, we can see there's a bunch of options here in the inspector. The first thing is the mode. So a mode can be either active, which means this movement routine is constantly updating and constantly making the enemy move, or wait, which means it's paused, basically. The guy is just going to stand there. And yes, I use the active and wait thing based on old Squaresoft games. I'm a nerd. What can I say? It's active time battle, son. So starting movement. This is going to be what direction this enemy is going to patrol in to begin with. So already facing, which it's set to right now, this guy, we can see just from looking at him, he's facing left. This just means he's going to start off by walking in this direction. We could also say explicit, which means we can specify left or right, or target, which means we can give it a target and have it move in the direction of that target to start with. Underneath that, we have turn. So this is what's going to cause the enemy to turn. We can do on wall contact. On ceiling or floor contact, this one only comes into play if the enemy is moving vertically. And on ledge contact. So let's leave those the way they are by default. There's also an option for at timer intervals, which means you can set a timer interval and the enemy will turn every time the timer goes off. Move and wave is something I want to get into more in a future video, but that is just straight up Medusa heads as far as the eye can see. We can also make it jump, assuming it's got a jump ability attached to it when it either touches a wall or a ledge. So this way you can make things like enemies that jump over bottomless pits. Let's turn those both off for now. And the last one is slopes. This one's a little bit more complicated, but basically the idea is that enemies need a way to differentiate between what is considered like a hard ledge, which they would turn on or jump if you set those, versus what is just like a gentle slope. And so this is letting you set the degree to which it considers something to be a ledge or a slope. So if you find your enemy is not jumping or turning, or conversely, if you find that it's trying to walk down a ledge and you don't want it to turn around, but it is, play with the settings in here, and you can define what the enemy considers to be a ledge versus a slope. So if we hit play, we should see the sky patrolling left and right and turning around when it hits this ledge. And it looks like we're in good shape. So that's a really basic movement. So now let's give this guy a sequence. Let's make this guy perform some sort of actions. So I'll click on add sequence, and we can see that gave us a new sequence under here. I'm going to give the sequence a descriptive name just because you can have as many sequences as you want, and we need some way to differentiate them. I'll call it jump sequence. So in the inspector for the sequence, the first thing we see is loop type. We can make a sequence that plays through once, and that's if there's no loop type. Or we can make it loop forever. Or we can set it to limited, which would let us have it loop only a certain number of times, or even a random number of times if we want that. So let's make this loop forever, so this sequence is just going to keep playing. So this sequences, as I said, they're made up of a list of actions. You can have as many actions as you want in one sequence. And by default, there's going to be one action here, which is going to be a wait action. If we click on this edit action button, we could change that to be a different type of action. And we can see there's a whole list of actions, which I will go over in lots of detail in future videos. But for the time being, let's keep this one as a wait action. Let's give it a randomized time. Let's say 1 to 2 seconds. And let's add another action underneath that in the sequence. So let's add an ability action. An ability action is going to be jumping, crouching, dashing, basically performing any of the abilities that this character has. And again, those abilities do have to be attached to its Rex controller for this to work. So let's go to, we've got an ability action. From the dropdown, I'm going to pick jump. And we can see actually there's a little warning that pops up if the enemy doesn't have the ability already attached. This warning in red shows up here that tells you explicitly what you need to do. So if we click on crouch, for example, he doesn't have a crouch state. The warning pops up. If we click on jump, the guy's got a jump state, so we're good. So right now we have wait 1 to 2 seconds, and then jump, and this is going to loop forever. So let's hit play and test this out. And once again, it looks like we're in good shape. So the final thing here is events. Let's give this guy the ability to react to something. Let's say, okay, how about when the player gets near to the enemy, he will fire a projectile at the player. So I'll click add event. There's 4 options here: damaged, distance, physics. Physics is like when they run into something or things like that, or timer. Let's do distance. And we can see this created a new event for us. The checkbox next to this event here is going to tell us whether or not this event is active at the start. So whether or not the enemy is actively looking for this condition. So our distance event is down here. Let's click on that. And in the inspector, we can see the formatting of an event is basically when something happens, perform all of these actions below it. And unlike a sequence, where the sequence is going to perform one action and then do the next one and then the next one in a sequence, with an event, with this kind of setup, all of the actions perform at the same time. So looking at the win distance box here. So this is looking for the distance of a certain target. We can set the type of target. And by default, it's set to player, which is what we want. If you wanted it to look for a different type of target, you could also do either the name of something else in the scene, or you could just drag and drop the transform of any other object in the scene and have it react to the positioning of that instead. But let's leave that on player. You can set uses dimensions, X and Y. We actually only need the X dimension, so I'll click on that. And then operator. So the operator is going to be whether this is reacting to something moving into a certain distance or moving out of a certain distance. So let's do into, so that way whenever the enemy comes within a certain distance, this will happen. And then we can set the distance. So let's say when the enemy gets 5, within 5 units of this enemy, or when the player gets within 5 units of this enemy, it'll perform its action. So for the action, in this box down here, I can click on action options to change the type of action. And let's change it to an attack. This will let us drag and drop an attack into the slot here. So I've got a very basic projectile attack set up on this enemy. So I'll drag that onto the slot. There is this is projectile box. This attack is going to be a projectile either way, but if I click the box, that gives us options about targeting, basically. So we could have it fire towards a certain target or fire at a specific angle that we wanted to set. But for the time being, let's just have it do its regular default thing and fire straight ahead. So this event is enabled. So what we should see now is that when the player gets close to the enemy, it'll fire. Oh my god, that is hilarious. That's the kind of thing, like, I'm trying to work on not cutting stupid things out of these videos. So what happened there is the bullet was set to hurt enemies, and so it shot the bullet and killed itself when it collided with its own bullet. Oh, that's so good. I'm just totally gonna leave that in. But yeah, let's edit that real quick. So I'm just gonna click on this dude's projectile attack really quick. He's firing this pellet shot. Pellet shot, contact damage. I'm gonna uncheck will damage enemies and check will damage player instead. And let's try that again. There we go. Okay, we're good. Oh my god. Okay. Okay. So we noticed, actually let me show you guys again, this is only going to happen one time, because when an event executes, it turns itself off afterwards. So even if we walk back within 5 units of the enemy, it's only going to ever fire one time. So what we can do if we want that to keep happening is we can add one more action to the bottom of this event. I'm going to click on Add Action. We can see a new one popped up here. And I'm going to change this action type to Toggle Event. Toggle Event is going to let us turn certain events on or off, or toggle them. So if it's on, it flips it to off, and vice versa. So I'm going to set it to Enable, and I'm going to drag this event basically onto itself, onto the slot. So what's going to happen is the event is going to finish, and then it's going to turn itself back on, so it'll keep repeating. So what we should see now is that every time we come within 5 units, he fires. And that's also amazing, and I'm totally going to leave that in, because there's nothing waiting at this point. Like basically just every frame when it sees the player is within 5 units, he's firing, and so he's just going to rapid fire. So let's see if we can get a little more crafty with how this works. Okay, so he's going to, I'm just sort of spitballing on the spot here to see how we can fix that. So I might have to think this through a little bit. So let's not have him wait, or let's not have him toggle this on immediately. I'm just going to remove this item. And I'm going to add a second event. Let's add a timer event. And let's disable the timer by default. I'll make this timer 2.5 seconds. And the action that plays when this timer goes off is that can toggle the distance event on. And then in the distance event, now after he fires the projectile, let's have him toggle an event, and he can turn on the timer event from there. So what should happen now, we've got 2 events. We've got one that happens on a timer and one when the player gets close. When the player gets close, he fires a projectile. That should turn on this timer event, which will wait for 2.5 seconds, and then turn on this distance event. So this should now give us, hopefully, a much more natural type of enemy behavior. Okay, let's try that. There we go. And of course, he's not going to do anything until the player gets close. And it looks like we got ourselves an enemy. So that's it for everything I wanted to show you guys in this introductory AI video. I like that. There was some kind of goofy stuff got left in there, and that's cool. I'm happy about that. So there's going to be plenty more videos going into more advanced AI stuff pretty soon. And I will see you guys then.